So before we get started, let's take a look at what's going to be in this course. We're going to start off with theory, the absolute square one basics, core concepts, the actual practice of learning experience designs. We'll look at various design processes and practices, implementing learning experiences in the real world, and then we'll look at the various ways that this can actually be applied. So applied live in a classroom setting, say, applied to online self-paced learning and how that's different, and how to design for that, and then how to design for blended learning experiences. Now, going a little bit deeper, in terms of the basics, we're going to take a look at how to explore solutions beyond training. Maybe the answer isn't actually training, and we're going to take a look primarily at motivation and break motivation down, learning needs analysis, learning objectives, how to measure the impact of learning, planning for learning and the importance of training and learning experiences in the actual project planning process within organizations, the real difference between live versus self-paced learning. Within core concepts, we're going to take a look at the difference between knowledge and skill development. How are these different and how do we train for knowledge versus skills? Learning styles and types, the myth of learning styles specifically, but the fact that there are learning preferences, the difference between active versus passive learning, cognitive load, concepts and abstraction, fidelity and the expertise reversal effect, cases, prototypes and exemplars, how we actually form concepts in our minds, feedback, timing, association and coincidence, how temporal factors play a role in learning, reflection and growth versus fixed mindsets, and how reflectivity really makes a big difference there. Real-world learning experiences, personalization and format translation, salience, how to make an actual learning experience memorable, the forgetting curve, how people forget things and how to prevent that from happening, motivation and the zone of proximal development, which is basically all about how to keep people engaged while they're learning. Now, when it gets into the design process, we're not going to be prescriptive. We're going to take a look at all kinds of different ways of designing things. And then you can pick whichever is appropriate for the task. And it's going to be different depending on what you're doing. And we're going to explain where and when to do those things. So we're going to take a look at different design models, the big ones out there, ADDIE versus SAM types of design, which is basically much more of a structured start to finish process. And the other one's more of an agile process, learner-centered design and what that means, how to gather source materials, knowledge elicitation and working with subject matter experts, how to set up storyboards, pathways, and scripts, assessment design and question types, gamification, learning through play, how people make it fun, design for problem solving, inquiry, and challenge-based learning, scenario-based learning and the garden path, design for practical project-based learning, which is what we're going to be doing in this course, design for just-in-time learning experiences in the real-world environment, transformative design for changing hearts and minds, which is a part of changing company cultures, which is something we're going to be taking a look at in our motivation series, pilot testing and gathering feedback, the importance of gathering data. Once we get beyond the design process, then we start looking at how do we actually implement this in the real world. So within implementing learning experiences, we're going to take a look at embedding learning experiences in the real world, LMS content versus SCORM authoring tools, what learning management systems generally can do for you versus SCORM authoring tools, learning from text, when should you learn from text? If you're learning from text, how should it be formatted, fonts, all kinds of things like that in terms of how do they affect learning. Diagrams, visual references, Mayer's multimedia principles, which apply to visual learning, screen capture, audio production, video production, animation, learning toys, games, and props in the real world, and how do you implement those? And then reflection and recall types of activities. So these are all various ways of implementing learning. They're not necessarily classroom or self-paced. They're not necessarily tied to any particular thing, but they're all different ways of implementing a learning experience. Then we're going to move on to live training. So how to set up for pre-work and prep when you're doing live training and why that's important, environments that support training live, classroom setups, social dynamics and icebreakers, polls and public declarations and how those work and the psychology of public declaration, playing games, scheduled events and attendance tracking, webinars and breakout rooms, working with student examples, scheduling training for maximum impact, and then follow up and post work. So these are all aspects of live training and ways of designing and building things for that environment. Then we're going to take a look at self-paced online learning, which a lot of learning is, including this, which you're experiencing right now. So setting the scope and context, software training and practical assignments, pacing and timing online, starting with a challenge or surprise, which is very useful, using practical examples, the importance of knowledge checks, when to use reflection activities, when to use quizzes and flashcards, learning logs and journals in skill development, and ways of measuring skill development so that you see that the skills are actually getting better. What happens in a blended environment, where blended environments work best, when should you combine these things and ways of combining them, providing equal opportunities in blended learning to make sure that the people who are self-paced or remote have equal opportunities to participate as people who are live or in the classroom, and learning games for blended groups.